Hi, you're listening to Status Stranded, Liminal, Allie by David Halem. I hope you enjoy. I lifted my hand to raise the shield that was built into the armor. The shield quickly formed, and not even a second later, the laser smashed into the shield, knocking me backwards 15 or 20 feet. My field of vision through the shield was distorted in the first place, but was even more distorted and discolored when the laser was continuously hammering against the transparent barrier that was coming from the sleeve of my armor. "This isn't familiar enough," the voice said again. I looked over to where Hosna was lying on the ground, in pain from the laser hit. Then I looked over at Anton, who may be in even more pain than Hosna, but he was barely moving. Little by little, I moved closer to Hosna. She was behind me and to my left about 20 feet away. The laser was pushing me backward, and I had to make sure I wasn't being carried away by the force of the blazing white beam. She shouted for Delmont to help me. For the first time, I saw his eyes truly. They were glowing a bright green color, and they were bright enough, shining to where each eye was totally enveloped in green light. This has to be a conscious action on his part. He took a short look at me, then to where the beam was coming from, and in a swift motion, he crouched down and folded his mechanical wings before he teleported. And as he rose up from his new location, the three large hooks from his wings picked up the Seru shooting the laser cannon. The alien roared in pain as he was lifted 6 feet into the air, initially. Delmont spread his wings, ripping apart the alien in the fastest motion I had ever seen. Blue-colored blood erupting and splattering in every direction, and still not even touching the ground as Delmont flew into the air, summoning his massive blade again before he backhandedly impaled another Seru on the top of his scalp. This point of the anchor blade, sinking down the spine of the alien and crushing the rest of his body into the ground. A handful of the Fortis took the opportunity to finish off the other Seru that were on that flank as Delmont continued to slaughter whatever Seru was in his line of sight. I turned back to Hosna and ran the last few feet toward her as pain in my side started to fade away. I shouted for Delmont to get Anton to one of the Soda critical health base. He ripped another Seru into large pieces, the dark blue blood covering his hands and chest. He looked over at Anton with greater speed than I had ever seen from a human. He flew and collected Anton in his arms and out of the battle-worn city. I could scarcely hear the chains on his arms clinking as he flew by. A drop of Anton's blood landed on the wrist of my armor, still streaming from the heat of the laser weapon. I reached over with my hand to wipe the drop off, but I couldn't bring myself to complete the motion. My attention was shifted to Hosna as she let out another groan. "Not enough people are dying. But do you care? Doesn't matter." Those words felt like getting impaled by Delmont's weapon from below my ribcage and out of my throat. I shook my head to get rid of the invading words, but they lingered like leeches in the anus. I looked around at our group. They were all in defensive positions around us, looking outward. Transparency and one of the Soda warriors, Sagramore, with light gray fur and hazel eyes, were both standing next to each other. I told them to lead the group as I get Hosna to safety. I told both of them to lead the group as I get Hosna to safety, or a venue of safety. The thigh of her left leg was still burning and jarring as pink flesh was dotted with black burn patches and the smell of her blood mixed poorly with a small amount of smoke. She was gritting her teeth in pain. We worked on helping her stand up, but every time her left leg had pressure on it, she would yell and swear in pain to the point of her voice growing hoarse. My breaths were fast, and were nearing the point of panic, but they were nowhere near as distressed as hers. Earth is dead. Why bother saving its children? I shook my head with no effect. The words still lingered. With a shaking hand, I put the handle of my lance in a holster on my waist. The deep, rolling sounds of the thunderous cityscape filled my ears as I bent down to pick up Hosna in my arms. She was shaken in pain and fear as she held my shoulders as I stood up, holding her. I wish I could have seen her be eager longer. I wish I could have seen her win, but now I hope that she can fight another day. For the longest time on Earth, the age for war was as young as 12. They would have never been fit for any of this. What a jarring thought as one of my secondary leaders clutched my shoulder, sobbing in pain. I looked around for the way back to the ship that we came in on, one of the Brecton shards. We had only gone not even half a mile into the city. The noise of everything overwhelmed me at once. The gunfire, the occasional explosions that rumbled through the city, the high whines of lasers, the shouting, the screaming. Everything rang in me, but this ringing was in my head and harder to heal. Trust me, you haven't felt despair yet. I grit my teeth at those words. Despair wasn't something I want to think about right now. All I want to do is get Hosna to safety. Then I can join the fight again and helping the 40s. She still stirred in my arms against her efforts to stay still. I was afraid that my heart would abuse Hosna with how hard it was beating in my chest, even through my armor. I was constantly looking around as I walked the direction that I know of to get to the shard ship. Looking down each street, watching out for danger as I slowly walked with my heavily wounded second leader. I was startled at the sight of a group of people, and in reaction to my muscles tensed around Hosna's body as I held her. She yelped in pain. I straightened up and took deep, heavy breaths before peering down the street again. It was Rain and his group. I shouted for them, and Rain was the first to look over at me. After he had quickly taken in the scene, he took a few of the people he had with them and quickly ran towards me. You don't deserve him. Those words suddenly felt like a cloud of ash burning in my brain as he ran closer. My heart sank when a group of Seru came around one of the corners on the right of their almost prestigious posters and empty searching eyes. One of them turned towards me and raised a weapon at me. He wasted no time with his aim as he shot at me. The laser was fine and thin like a pin, and it penetrated Hosna. And with no time passing, it went through me as well. I dropped to the ground and I screamed. Hosna let out a feral cry of agony in multiple bouts as she was shot, and then when she hit the ground. As I was screaming, I felt air escaped my lungs in 2 places. The air coming out of my mouth felt hot as my cold blood started to bubble in my lungs. The hole in my lungs stung and screamed at me. I was on my side with Hosna sprawled in front of me. Her movements were subtle, but each minute to quiver was painful for her. From the view that I had on the ground as discomfort held me hostage, one of the Seru took a double glance at me before he walked over towards me. The other Seru grunted at him in their language, but he quieted them with something he said. I coughed up another sputter of blood, my gold blood painting the road in a single place. The Seru bent down and touched the blood on the ground with the tip of his finger. He smothered his fingertips with the blood as if he was testing the blood for something. He stood up and kicked me in the face, putting me face down into the road. He repeatedly pounded his foot on the back of my head to the point where my face was being flattened against the road, and the dust rose into my soft, broken skin. I hope you die, Allie. I screamed, and the force of the scream burned in my chest and gurgled as it scratched out of my throat. The Seru then picked me up, but he didn't even get me a foot off the ground before he was struck down by something. I rolled on the ground. My breathing was too fast and unstable to make any painful noises. I turned my head to see what had happened. Delmont was swinging his blade through the Seru with intense force and anger. The fat cyborg roared a war cry as he hammered his anchor blade repeatedly down onto the Seru. Blue blood bursting everywhere in the carnage. Transparency ran up as fast as she could with her little legs and was mowing down the offending aliens with the minigun. There were footsteps running towards me. Someone picked me up by my shoulder and held me to face him. Rain. I was relieved to see his face, that he was okay. You don't deserve him. I cried, and every sob that pulsed out was painful. Each tremor was a burning sensation that stretched with a very intentional discomfort in my chest. He told me I want to be okay, that I wasn't going to die, and that he's here now. You don't deserve him. But those words were being covered by a veil now, as he had me here. The bleeding in my lungs was starting to subside now. My breaths were starting to get their structure back. There was a fuzzy red shadow that approached Rain and I from the left. Both Rain and I looked up at him. He had one of our Soto leaders with him, holding him by the neck with one hand. And in the other hand, he had a gun aimed at Rain. Through the soda he asked us if we had tentai seeds. Rain took a deep breath before he shook his head, and the soda answered for the Seru standing above us. I tensed up. Even though at this point I couldn't afford to be tensed with the way my body was wounded. He growled before the soda responded for him in a scared voice. Good now. Do not intervene. The Seru threw the soda to the ground before taking out a radio-like device and growled into it as he walked away. I was confused. Why was he asking about seeds? Why were they so important that he asked us about them, and then told us not to do anything? Rain asked me if I was okay. I told him that I'll heal. He saw the Seru feel my blood before turning tone and started to beat me. I told him that I don't know what that was about. A different kind of sound echoed through the city now. Dust and smoke crushed in from my right side, making it to where I wasn't able to see what was going on. As the dust settled, there was a large transparent sphere in the middle of the road, and inside the sphere was another Seru alien, but this one looked scared. One of the Seru on the ground ran up to the sphere and joined his friend inside. The Seru that was originally in the sphere was apprehensive about the one that joined him in the sphere. The one that joined him took out a knife and cut open the palm of his hand. He grunted in pain as he did so, the blue blood slowly pouring out of his hand. He then extended his hand out towards the other Seru with the knife. The other Seru, with a shaking hand, reached out to take the knife, but he hesitated for long seconds, looking back and forth at his friend and at his knife. A massive explosion hit the glass sphere. The shockwave from the explosion shattered glass on the nearby buildings and knocked down the dozens of people standing around the sphere. But as the smoke from the explosion rose, the sphere appeared to be untouched. The only disturbance was the other Seru, who was hesitant before. He was looking around outside where he stood, and with this distraction, his friend quickly grabbed his hand and cut it open. The blood was gold, like my blood. It seemed to glow like how my blood glows. Rain and I glanced at each other, but our attention was taken again when the gold-blooded Seru roared in pain as his friend quickly took something out of his pocket and put it into a bleeding wound of his hand. After this, with his bleeding hand, he grabbed the bleeding hand of the gold-blooded Seru friend. At contact, their eyes glowed, a blazing white with a blinding gold respectively, and within them, the same light shone from within. They roared, but it wasn't a roar of pain. It was a roar of excitement as their muscles tensed and contracted as their backs arched back. The sphere shattered, and in its place was what I could only describe as a very different kind of space. Within where the sphere used to be, there was a different kind of sphere. Through the sphere, you couldn't see the stricken city behind it, but instead, there was a completely different space or realm within the sphere. And this sphere didn't have any border to it. The other space or realm through the sphere was filled with color. Swirling greens, edges of red, seas of purple, orange clouds, teal structures. All a realm or space, not like our own. Some strange nebulous reality with little to no coherence to it. Both Seru were floating suspended in the middle of the sphere. Everything still glowing and shining bright from their bodies. From within the sphere came two limp creatures. No, one looked more creature than the other, and the other looked like that of a Seru. The larger figure that looked like a Seru had snow-white fur instead of red fur, what we normally saw in a Seru race. This larger one was up to 30 times bigger than one of the Seru. It had black eyes instead of the white eyes that they had, and in a circle around this white Seru was a black halo that seemed to have no depth to it. It was only the color. The smaller creature was what appeared to be some snake creature that had to be no smaller than 70 feet long from head to tail. It was a black snake with red eyes, no scales, and its mouth stretched from halfway down its body to the other half. When it opened its mouth, thousands of arms and hands reached out of its hauntingly elongated mouth up to 15 feet from the creature itself, and the inside of its mouth was framed with needle-like teeth. I trembled as I looked at the two creatures. I was mistaken. The creatures were bigger. Far, far bigger than I had thought before. The forehead of the white Seru rose up to the Seru that had the gold blood, and he sunk into the massive being. Likewise, the other Seru was absorbed into the massive snake creature. And both Seru bursted through the portal. Both beings had to be up to 3 miles large, and they rose out of the portal sphere. The air they displaced was being dragged up and away with the entities that absorbed the two Seru, dragging anything loose in delight towards the now expanding portal. The portal expanded to the point where cracks were starting to form in the structure of it, until it shattered as the beings fully exited this other realm, sending pieces of the portal shattering and soaring everywhere. Rain and I heard a scream. We looked in shock as Kennocha was holding onto a light pole, and above her was a piece of portal slowly descending onto her. I asked Rain why she was here, and he told me that she wanted to be with Mallory. With less hesitation, Rain ran and pushed her out of the way of the falling portal, and the image of Rain was replaced with a block of portal that went to this other realm. The voice spoke one last time. Good. I sobbed, and I wailed, looking up to the sky. Why? I screamed. Why? I sobbed frantically. I don't know if I'd felt more despair than what I was feeling in this moment. My fiancé was just crushed by a portal. A number of my group was either severely hurt, dead, or dying. And to make matters worse, the Malzina have appeared in the sky. The only comfort I had was Kennocha running around the piece of portal to hug me. She was frantically sobbing, but she eventually got out the words. Is the world ending again? I took in a shaking breath, but didn't have the words to tell this little girl the truth. I nodded as my breast choked up in my chest.
Hi, this is David Halem, and you just finished listening to Liminal, Allie, Part 2 from my story, Status Stranded. I hope you enjoyed. See you next week.